It is such a pleasure and a privilege to be able to speak to all the brilliant young women who have come into this virtual series of the NAS Legacy. And I am really delighted to be with you. As many of you will know, I first became involved in the work to strengthen young women and girls when I was really young, because I qualified as a barrister at 21. And I am a child of the Commonwealth. As you may know, the Commonwealth is made up of 2.4 billion people from 54 countries right across the Commonwealth. But because I was born in the small island of Dominica, my father is Antiguan, but I was brought up in the United Kingdom. There are so many levels which makes me a Commonwealth child. And all of those of you who live in the United Kingdom or in any of our other 53 countries, you're all Commonwealth citizens too. And I am so privileged to share my story with you because I have a feeling it is the story that many of you have experienced and may be experiencing now. I mentioned that I've been doing this work since I was 21 because I became a barrister at 21. And that was the first time that the issues of domestic violence, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and all those issues first impinged on my consciousness. And it was a shock to me to understand that so many of the girls in the world had not had the warmth, the love, the affection that had enabled me to withstand so much that I had faced until that time. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey and my life. I have to tell you that I was always really reluctant to talk about me, but I hope that on this occasion, maybe it'll help you to see that in talking about me, I may be talking about you too. Because mine has been a fascinating journey, sometimes along lonely roads, sometimes through places filled with family, friends, and colleagues. But there have been testing times and times of joy, of elation, as well as anxiety. It has been a life of considerable contrast, yet always with a strong sense of a continuing narrative and purpose. And through it all, I can never forget the support, solidarity, and love with which it has been my blessing and my good fortune to be surrounded. My story begins in a small village in St. Joseph in Dominica, where I was born. I am the 10th of 12 children. My parents had 7 boys and 5 girls, and they described each of us as their only child. They had 12 only children. My mother was from Dominica, my father from Antigua. And as I mentioned earlier, at an early age, I moved with my family to England, where I grew up in Walthamstow in the East End of London. Walthamstow in those days was very different from Walthamstow today. We were the only Black family to move into that area when I first arrived. And therefore we stood out in a way that perhaps we would not stand out today. And so being a classic child of the Commonwealth, my parents brought me up to believe very firmly that each and every one of us has a special talent. And it was our job to find that talent, to hone it and to develop it, and then use it for the betterment and benefit of other people. And that was the attitude and approach by which I was taught to live. Through school and college, in sport and personal attainment, as well as in academic excellence, I was encouraged to aim high. But my father was probably the greatest feminist I have known. He instilled in me the understanding that being female ought to be no impediment to what I could achieve, so long as I believed in myself and worked hard. I didn't realize how precious that encouragement and empowerment was, because I thought that everyone had parents like mine. And as I've grown older, I realize how that is just, unfortunately, tragically, not true for all of us. And that each of us has to find someone who will believe in us, who will support us, and that sometimes those someones can be our friends, our relatives, a teacher, or someone who is a friend of a friend to tell us you can do this. And through school and at college, the love and the support of my family and my faith in God spurred me on. And perhaps that is what led me to achieve a number of firsts in my career. Having gained my law degree at the age of 20, I was in 1977 at the age of 21 called to the bar and went on to practice as a lawyer. Then in 1991, at the age of 35, I became the first Black woman and the youngest woman ever to be a Queen's Counsel. In fact, I was the youngest person since Pitt the Younger to become a Queen's Counsel. And I was the first Black woman to be appointed Assistant Recorder, Recorder, and Deputy High Court Judge. Then in 1997, I was elected as a bencher of Minto Temple. And a bencher is like the ruling body which governs the inn. And there are 4 inns of court, and you have to be belong to an inn in order to be a barrister. And I was the youngest person and first Black woman to be so honored to be appointed as a bencher. And in that same year, I was appointed to be a member of the House of Lords and later became a minister in the United Kingdom's government, serving in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the Home Office, and the Lord Chancellor's Department. I was the first woman since the post was created in 1315 to be appointed Her Majesty's Attorney General for England, Wales, and for Northern Ireland too. And in these posts, I was able to work on reform and legislation affecting matters very close to my heart, undertaking major reform of the criminal justice system and introducing measures which very significantly reduce domestic violence and violence against women and girls. In the interministerial group on domestic violence, which I chaired, it led to the delivery of a multidisciplinary approach to tackle this crime. It cut domestic violence by 64% and resulted in annual savings of 7.1 billion in England and Wales. And now I stand here as the 6th Secretary General of the Commonwealth, a position I took up in 2016, having been appointed by the 53 then leaders in 2015. The heads of government of the 54 countries of the Commonwealth now have entrusted to me the responsibility of serving 2.4 billion people of the Commonwealth as their Secretary General. And today we are celebrating the post being created 55 years ago, and I am the first woman to hold it. So while I am fortunate to have been able to claim a lot of firsts in my career, I've also in many ways been rather sad to have been the first. And I most certainly do not want to be the last in any of these roles, because although we celebrate the fact that in 2017 I became Secretary General, the first woman, part of me couldn't help but feel, why has it taken so long for we women to break the ceiling, to break that glass ceiling and to get through? So I hope that amongst those of you listening to me now are girls and young women who will be the next generation of female leaders, and the next after that. I will be so happy when someone tells me I am the second or the 200th or the second woman to occupy a position to which many women before me have already been appointed. I look forward to the day when I'm told you are the 10 millionth woman to be allowed into this position, because 1/3 of the population of our planet live in Commonwealth countries, and that is over 2.4 billion across the 5 regions of the world, more than 60% of them under the age of 30. And the countries in which they live are set in every continent and ocean. Just think of the richness and the inclusivity of that Commonwealth diversity. And in this context, I made clear on becoming Secretary General that my ambition and purpose is to put the wealth back into Commonwealth, but also to put the common back into wealth. And this really means opening up horizons of hope and opportunity for people in all our member countries, particularly those in vulnerable or isolated locations and from marginalized or disadvantaged communities and backgrounds. And in the context of our conversation today, let me share with you just a few perspectives on the areas which I believe can do most to help break the glass. First, tackling violence against women and girls, which, as I've already said, has long been a priority for me. Domestic violence affects 1 in 3 women across the world. We all know or can imagine the pain and lasting damage it causes for those directly affected and for the societies in which they live. And sadly, that means the communities in which we all live. With determination and united action, progress can be made, but it takes all of us from wherever we are to recognize that we are powerful, we have choices, and we can address this and we can make it better. It's just that we need to do it together, and we need not to be silent about it. So we must not be complacent, but we can take encouragement from the fact that the past century has witnessed the greatest advances for gender equality in human history. For instance, in 1893, New Zealand became the first self-governing country to allow women to vote in parliamentary elections. In 1960, Sri Lanka elected the world's first female prime minister. Yet even after a century during which gender gap has narrowed more quickly than ever before, huge progress is still required in order for a girl born today to be on equal footing with a boy. Which is why, in order to assess and accelerate progress, we in the Commonwealth are now working really hard to measure our collective progress in 4 areas: women in leadership, women's economic empowerment, ending violence against women and girls, gender and climate change. Collectively, Commonwealth member countries have set themselves the goal of ensuring that women hold at least 30% of elected political offices. At present, only 1 in 5 Commonwealth parliamentarians is a woman. So far, 30% or more of members are women in parliaments of only 14 Commonwealth countries. 10 Commonwealth countries have achieved the target of 30% or more women ministers. And I'm confident that we can change this for the better, for the future, but we will need the commitment of the girls and young women today to just think about the power that is within them and to understand that they have the talent, the ability to make the difference, to be the difference that we need to see in this world. And the Commonwealth can be a powerful means for enabling the voices of all to be heard on the global stage and for the concerns of the marginalized and disadvantaged to be considered when decisions are being made of a more powerful, by the more powerful and the more strong. Yes, we face some of the most critical challenges, that many of us have ever seen, challenges that threaten our very existence. But together, working and acting as one people, one family, we can make a different future. I believe passionately in what the Commonwealth stands for and what we can achieve together, because no one achieves anything on his or her own. Our real wealth is what we have in common, our shared humanity, our capacity to love one another, and our desire for a world in which everyone, no matter who they are, can expect to live their life to the full. So we have to stand together in solidarity as sisters and brothers determined to change the world. And in that spirit, I'm reminded of the cry that went up in Malta in 2015 for the first ever Commonwealth Women's Forum, which took place alongside the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting at which I was appointed Secretary General. The cry that went up was, alone we are invisible. Together we can be invincible. And I hope those words will inspire you as they have inspired me, and that we will think and act according to make the world a better place for all of us, but most of all, for those who enjoy few, if any, advantages to fulfill their potential or opportunity to make their voices heard. When we were in Malta, the then Prime Minister of Joseph Muscat came to see the women at the Women's Forum, and he spoke with great passion. He said, I've just come from the Youth Forum, so young people under the age of 30. And he said, there was our heart, the beating heart of the Commonwealth. And he said, now I come to join the women. And here are the brains of the Commonwealth. And then he said this, I am later going to be with the heads. And so quite clearly, the young people were the heart, the women were the brains, but the men were going to meet with some women as the heads. Now, I've told you about the journey. And at first blush, that journey seems to have been so fast. And when you look back, you may think it was always there for me. So let me tell you that when I was your age, if you had told me that I would achieve any of the things that I have achieved, I would have laughed, because I had no understanding of the opportunities about what I could or could not do. When I was 15, I went to speak to my careers officer. I had thought that maybe I could be a lawyer. Most of my family were scientists, and my father was greatly disappointed that I wasn't going to be the family's physicist, because we had so many scientists amongst my brothers and my sisters that he thought that should be my pathway too. And when I went to speak to my careers officer, I was still one of the few Black children in my school. I was met with wry amusement and a little disbelief that I, a child living in Walthamstow, the 10th of 12 children in a Black family with very few financial advantages, should dare to aspire to join one of the professions which was at that stage predominantly white and male. When I joined the legal profession at the age of 21, 97% of the bar was white male, 3% were women, and 0.01% of those women were Black. So when I talked about becoming a lawyer at 15, my careers advisor said that I should perhaps lower my aspirations so that I wouldn't be disappointed. She asked me what I did at the weekends and whether I worked. And I think I must have just turned 16 when we had this conversation, because I was able to say that I worked in Sainsbury's on the counter on a Saturday. And she beamed at me with great delight and said that maybe I should change my aspiration, because if I worked really hard, maybe when I left school, I could aspire to become a supervisor in Sainsbury's. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a supervisor in Sainsbury's, and it is a great job to have. But it wasn't one that spoke to my talent, but it did tell me how she saw me. And that was a very important thing for me to know. And I understand that had it not been for my mother, my father, and my 11 brothers and sisters, I may have been crushed by what she said, and I may not have aspired to anything more. But I have what all of you now have through the NAS legacy. I had someone and people who believed in me, who saw that I could do anything that I put my mind to if I found what my passion was. And the big message that I would like to give all of you is, don't let other people define you. Don't let them put limits on your ambition, because each of you, as my parents told me, each of you have been given a talent which is very, very precious and is yours alone. There is only one you. Nobody can do you better than you. So I hope that you will be surrounded by love and affection. I hope through the companionship and support that the NAS legacy will bring you, you will be able to have people who walk with you, and you will walk with people who are your friends, and you will encourage them and see the beauty inside them and the talent, and you'll nurture that, because we live in very troubled and troubling times. There are so many things to frighten us. We are living through the COVID pandemic. Climate change is posing an existential threat to so many of us, and the economic tsunami that may come as a result of these two intersecting are also frightening so many people. We've been told that in the future we may not have about 2 trillion in terms of the world's economy, and that even in my Commonwealth we are going to perhaps lose about 220 billion. Yet we have you. We have the next generation, and you are so glorious and wonderful and talented and innovative, and the human genius of the generations before, which has got us into this mess, are going to be wiped out by the human genius that you all represent. And you will find the solutions. You will help to craft the new pathways that we need so that our aspirations to meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, all of which are embedded in our Commonwealth Charter, I believe you have the capacity to deliver it all. And so I am so proud of you, proud of every single one of you who have logged on for this Breaking the Glass talk. Because you, by doing just that, have demonstrated that you're already part of the solution. So please, believe in yourselves, celebrate yourself, celebrate each other, support each other, and go out there and do us all a favor and just change this world, because I believe you can do it. And thank you.